Okay, how many of you have heard value objects before? What is value objects? Nobody? You have heard it. Good. Anybody else? Nice. Since majority of you don't know, this presentation becomes easier for me now. I'll have lesser questions. Okay, cool. Before we jump into what is value objects, what are design patterns? Basic interview question. What's a design pattern? Anyone? Set of best practices. Okay. That's right. Anyone else? What's a design pattern? Go ahead. Okay. Why design patterns? Set of tools, a set of instructions, a blueprint, or something is fine. That's a design pattern. Why design patterns? To develop a quality code, right? Anything else? Why design patterns? It's a framework. By the way, tell me one thing. Can I say that a design pattern is like an algorithm? Is it or is it not? Okay. So design pattern, as I told you, and as you guys have already said, it is a blueprint. It is a framework, which is a solution to a known problem. It is not an algorithm. It is not a code. Okay. And one such design pattern, you have come across various design patterns, and one such design pattern is value objects. Okay. And it's a very simple design pattern, which most of you have probably used it before. If you have worked on Spring, you've probably used it, but you probably have used it, but you do not really know what is the importance and what is the significance of value objects in your application. So I'll be telling you more on what is this value objects and how it adds value to your code, how it makes your code much simpler. Guarding and too much guarding, it says. Now, in your code, in your application, somebody spoke about Spring security. Vikrant spoke about Spring security, right? So what do you do when you have an input and you need to validate it? You write some if blocks to check what the input is doing or what it shouldn't be doing, probably throw some exceptions, have some custom exceptions here and there. And what else do you do? How else do you validate your code? You have null pointer checks, maybe, right? And these are all simple things that you add into your code, and this makes your code slightly more tedious to read, slightly more difficult to analyze or compile, and eventually it might bring out more bugs in your code. As although you're trying to reduce your bugs, eventually it might increase the number of bugs in your code because you're doing a lot of manual checks and manual validations throughout your classes. And to prevent this problem, we have got the solution, and that is value objects. So what you'll be doing is, inside one single class, we will have multiple other objects we're using encapsulation. And if the object is being instantiated properly, then all well and good. And if it's not, then you can throw whatever exceptions that you want. We'll go with a straightforward example now. Um, what data type will you use for storing some phone number, let's say? Long? Who said long? Okay. Is he correct? Is long okay? String? What else? Any other big integer? Anything else that you can use for a phone number? Which is correct? Which is the most suitable one? String? Why string? Because it's not necessary numbers. Tomorrow I can have +91 or something, right? Now, what are the limitations? What are the limitations of having string as a data type for phone numbers? Valid or invalid, right? So, for example, you can have anybody can input something like ABC or -123. This can also be a phone number. So, what you will do in a general case scenario, you'll probably put a check that the number should not be less than 0 and it should be a character, or it shouldn't be a character. So these are the simple checks that you'll probably put into your code and ensure that the phone number is valid. So let's assume that there's a user and there's a phone number. So you'll put up basic simple checks and try to say that this phone number is valid. But using value objects, this whole process can be made much simpler, much easier to read. Okay, this is let's say this is a phone number value object and very simple instantiation of the class. So I've used an annotation at value here. So at value, make sure that this is immutable and it is comparable, which means that you have got the hash code and equals method. Even the toString method is included. So that's why I've got the at value. Value object should always be immutable. And it should have it's suggested a best practices that it is comparable. So in the phone number VO, I will have some methods for validating the phone number. Here in this particular example, we are making use of Google phone number library. Validate phone number, it will throw whatever exceptions. Basically, this whole thing comes under a class called phone number VO. So that tomorrow, whenever you want to make use of this class, instantiate this class, it's much easier. Instead of having pojos or beans separately and then you instantiate them or validate them. Okay. And you can use this particular VO directly into your controllers. But then there is a issue. Can anyone look at this slide and tell me what is possibly the issue with using VOs or using value objects? So this is a simple controller, some post mapping, get mapping, request param. Here I'm using string phone number. Instead of string, you can replace that with the phone number VO. What do you think will be the issue if I use a phone number VO here? Serialization. Serialization. So Spring does not. So Spring uses Jackson for serialization, and by default, it does not. It cannot serialize custom objects. So in this cases, this is the issue which that will come up with when you use any custom class. In this case, the VO is your custom class. So you'll have to write your own, implement your own serializer, maybe a third implementation of it, and come up with your own serializer to get the JSON or whatever is the input, the output that you need. So for custom serialization, again, there is a very it's a lengthy code that you can check out in my Git repo. I added the bitly here. So to summarize, you can read here the value object is a reference to the object. We'll use the value object, and the internal structure only matters when you're trying to convert it into a into some sort of decoding, encoding, serialization, or when you're trying to put it in a database. It is immutable and it has best suggested to be comparable. So now tell me, how many of you have used value objects? Pretty much all of you have probably used value objects, and you see how it is one of the most commonly used, lesser known design patterns in Spring, and suggested to use value objects as much as possible because of all the advantages that we have seen so far. That's about it. Thank you.